Right, good morning, everybody. It's 10:30 and welcome to JM Finn's Spring Seminar. Tom Waldron is Director of Investor Relations at AstraZeneca. Tom, thanks very much indeed for joining us today. And over to you for an immersion into AstraZeneca and, of course, an update on the COVID response.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, everybody. Today, I'm going to introduce you to AstraZeneca and what we do. I'll talk about the disease areas in which we operate, the way we're innovating in the discovery and delivery of life-changing medicines that contribute to patients and society, and by doing so, create value for shareholders. I'll touch on the proposed acquisition of Alexion, which is expected to close in the third quarter of this year, bringing opportunities in rare diseases and increasing our presence in immunology. I'll talk a bit about our performance in the first quarter as a snapshot of the business as it stands today, and its continuing positive trajectory after our return to growth in around the mid-2018. I'll talk briefly about two engines of that growth: investment in emerging markets and the way in which we've increased R&D productivity over the last 10 years. I'll go on to talk about how that all creates value for shareholders and how it does so whilst maintaining our commitment to do so to operate sustainably. And I'll finish with an update on the way we're playing our part in the fight against COVID-19, and in particular, our agreement with Oxford around the production of the AstraZeneca vaccine, variously known as COVID-19 vaccine, AstraZeneca and Vaxzevria. So the next two slides in this deck contain forward-looking statements and forward-looking statements specific to the acquisition of Alexion. We only have around 15 minutes for these prepared remarks, so I won't go through them, but they are available on our website and all the materials, and you are advised to read them. Moving on. Moving on several slides. Let's go back. This slide often ends our presentations. It's a summary of AstraZeneca, but I think provides a good overview of the business. There are three pillars here. Our global presence, which, as I said, is differentiated by a significant exposure in emerging markets. Our strong pipeline, and I'll talk a bit more about what we're doing to create and maintain that strong pipeline. But we have 22 phase 3 medicines. That's medicines late stage of their development program, and a very full early and mid stage pipeline. And we have improving financials. I talked about our return to growth in 2018. Our growth continues to be above industry average, significantly above industry average, and that's being driven by a broad base of medicines. We have 9 blockbuster medicines, which are defined in the industry as medicines which have in excess of $1 billion of annual revenue. All of that is based on a foundation that's been put in place of focus on particular areas where we have the strongest science. And this was something that Pascal Soriot and the team led when he joined the business in 2012 to focus AstraZeneca on these core areas where we have the strongest science in oncology, in the science of cancer, and in cardiovascular renal metabolism, which we refer to as CVRM, that covers diseases like heart disease and diabetes, and respiratory and immunology, which covers diseases like asthma, COPD, and immunologically driven diseases like lupus. In terms of digging a little bit deeper into the details of that, you can see in one of those areas, in oncology, our largest product area, you can see here important medicines for AstraZeneca. 2 in lung cancer, Tagrisso and Imfinzi, Lynparza in ovarian, but also covering breast, pancreatic and prostate cancers. In HER2, a more recent addition to the portfolio, which we in-licensed from Japanese company Daiichi Sankyo, which is currently approved in breast, but is in the clinic looking at other cancers like gastric cancer and lung cancer. And Calquence, which is doing particularly well in the market in CLL, chronic lymphocytic leukemia, with very good efficacy and very good tolerability. And that, particularly that latter tolerability, is allowing it to take share from an existing incumbent in that market. That's oncology. Moving on to biopharmaceuticals, which contains both cardiovascular renal metabolism, CVRM, and our respiratory immunology business. You can see Farxiga here, a key medicine in driving our growth in Q1 of this year in type 2 diabetes and heart failure, and recently improved also in chronic kidney disease. Fasenra, a medicine for severe asthma, Lokelma in hyperkalemia, which is an excess of potassium, and roxadustat in anemia for CKD, which is making a strong start in China, which is the first market to approve that medicine. This next slide deals with the next chapter, really, of AstraZeneca's story here, and the addition to that focus on 3 areas, with the addition of a focus on rare diseases. Rare diseases are defined as diseases which afflict around 1 in 2,000 of the population, which equates to about 200,000, 150 to 200,000 individuals in the US. Ultra rare diseases affect less than 1 in 50,000, or around 6,000 people in the US or Europe. However, rare diseases affect a lot of people. There are around 7,000 rare diseases, and in the US, the number of people impacted by those diseases is around 25 to 30 million, so approaching 1% of the population. So there's a very significant area of unmet need in rare diseases, and that is making it one of the fastest growing areas of pharmaceuticals, with double-digit growth expected through the next 5 or 6 years at least, and an area where there is a significant opportunity to drive science and meet those unmet needs and expand the business. And so we're excited to welcome Alexion. That deal is expected to close in the 3rd quarter of this year. It will be accretive both in terms of profitability and cash on day one. And the cultural fit between the organizations is excellent, but it also fits in with the immunology part of the business, medicines like Fasenra that I talked about earlier. I said I'd give you a snapshot of the business as at Q1, and this slide summarizes that, both in terms of the way our business splits across those different focus areas, those different disease areas, and the way it splits geographically. You can see that oncology is around 40% of our business. New CVRM and respiratory and immunology are both around 20%. You can see in terms of our geographic split that, unlike many pharmaceutical companies, the US is not our largest geographic segment. It's actually emerging markets, which are 35% of the business as at Q1. And that's been an important part of our growth story. That growth story you see here, you see how Q1 fits into the overall recovery from the patent expiries that we saw from 2010 through 2012 that led to a significant decline in revenue for AstraZeneca at a time when the pipeline wasn't particularly full, and so there was nothing to take the place of medicines like Nexium as they came off patent. What Pascal and the team have sought to do over the last 10 years is to build a business that's based on a broader foundation of growth, return the business to growth, but at the same time invest in the pipeline in order to take advantage of some of the advances that are happening across science, particularly in the area of personalized medicine, where it's possible to direct medicines to specific targets and specific mechanisms that help smaller groups of patients, but help them more. That's been a successful strategy. It's led to that return to growth, as I've seen. And on the right-hand side of this slide, you can see the medicines that have contributed the most to that growth here span the different areas that I've talked about. The mulberry-coloured bars, the red-coloured bars are oncology. CVRM is the light blue, and respiratory and immunology is the dark blue. In terms of the drivers of that, I've talked a bit about emerging markets, but an important key driver, I guess the engine of value creation in any pharmaceutical company, is your ability to create value with R&D. And R&D includes a lot of failure. The industry manages to get around 11% of medicines from the first experiments in humans in the clinic through to actually having a marketable medicine. AstraZeneca actually started its journey 10 years ago with a lower than average R&D productivity on that measure, around 4%. And over time, by focusing on particularly those opportunities in personalized medicine, we've managed to increase the productivity to the point where we're now significantly above in industry average, with over 20% success rate in terms of getting medicines from that first point in the clinic through to the market. And you can see those rising bars here in this slide. There's more on this discussed in our Biopharmaceutical Day which we ran in March. The webcast for that is still on the website, on the AstraZeneca website. So if you're interested in this area, it's worth going back to that and looking at Manny Pangalos talking about some of the things that we've done in order to increase R&D productivity over time. The next couple of slides in this deck, which I think is going to be available on JMFIM's website, shows the strength and depth in that portfolio. Here you can see in the biopharmaceuticals side all of the medicines that we have in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Medicines go through these 3 phases of review over a course of several years of development, and you can see that we have many candidates for new medicine for the future. That also culminates. This is a slide that always gets a lot of attention in our presentations and shows the news flow that we expect over the course of the next couple of years, which you can see is very full. So lots of exciting clinical data to come out in the second half of this year, and some significant new medicines hopefully coming to market, including anifrolumab for lupus and tezepelumab in severe asthma. In terms of how all of that translates into creating shareholder value, well, by driving R&D and by driving that focus, we can grow revenue growth. And as I say, we have industry-leading revenue growth. Q1 was 7% revenue growth, still very good versus the rest of the industry, but was dragged back a bit by the fact that Q1 of last year was seeing very significant benefit from stocking related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we haven't had that this quarter, and so it's a difficult comparison. We are guiding to revenue growth of 13 to 15% for this year. That revenue growth will drive operating leverage. We are investing in R&D and in OpEx around product launches and around our pipeline, as I've said, but that investment is not going to increase at the same rate as we're expecting revenues to increase, and therefore we expect to see margins expand. We expect to see operating leverage. That will drive improvement in profitability and cash flow, which will allow us to continue to delever the business and to maintain a progressive dividend policy with a stated ambition to increase the dividend beyond the Alexion transaction in 2022. We're doing all of that at the same time as maintaining a commitment to sustainable growth. There are 3 pillars to our sustainability strategy. Again, I can refer you to our sustainability report, which goes into all of these things in detail. Maintaining access to healthcare, protecting the environment, and maintaining an ethical and transparent approach to the science that we do, all very important to us. In terms of access to healthcare, if you're interested in this area, our initiative in Africa, Healthy Heart Africa, is something we're particularly proud of, where we're helping to diagnose high blood pressure in underserved markets in Africa and bring patients who need help. They're sometimes very affordable kind of interventions that we can make once people are diagnosed. There's just not enough diagnosis going on. So Healthy Heart Africa is a banner project for us, but there are others as well, like the Youth Health Program and others that you can read about in that sustainability report. In terms of the highest profile area of our sustainability approach, it is our agreement with Oxford, which was signed just over a year ago last year to help bring their potential vaccine to market in the pandemic against COVID-19, and to do so on a not-for-profit basis during the course of the pandemic, to ensure that we can play our part in defeating this general disease, which has cost the lives of now sadly 3 million people. The data that we've produced, some of it is detailed here. We're starting to see a lot of real world data from the vaccine programs in the UK and other places, which is showing that we are playing a very significant role in preventing disease and preventing transmission. The most recent data, which is very significant as well. In terms of the process of bringing that vaccine to market in 9 months, when typically a vaccine would take 10 to 15 years. We're very proud of what we've done. It's not been a totally smooth path in terms of ramping the production of the vaccine, as you've seen. We have had some variability in yields across the supply chain. That's actually pretty typical in a biological process, but in this case, we didn't have the time in order to build buffer inventories and such as you would normally do in this process. And so we are working to improve yields in Europe in particular, and we have committed there that we will increase the supply. We've delivered 30 million doses in Q1, and we've said we'll deliver another 70 million doses in Q2. And so having invoiced for 68 million doses in Q1, we're seeing a ramp in production. If you include the sub-licensees, and in particular Serum Institute of India, in the total production, as of the end of April, we were somewhere north of 300 million doses that have been shipped globally. So we are playing a very significant role in hopefully defeating that pandemic over time. So with that, I will open it up to questions.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. I will just stop sharing our screen so that I can see if there are any questions. I've got one here, if you don't mind, which might just set the scene on the UK. Why does the UK, by global standards, have such a strong life sciences sector, and what aspects of it do you think AstraZeneca find particularly beneficial for its business?
Yeah, sure. No, I think it's a great question actually, and one that with the opening of the biopharmaceutical campus in Cambridge this year, is something that's very close to our hearts. I think what you find in all areas of science and technology is that you get the benefits of clustering. So if you can cluster in an area of academic excellence like Cambridge, with a real focus on the science of oncology and other medical science, then you can get real benefits from that in terms of the kind of academic synergies and scientific synergies that come from that. It can be hard to quantify those, but you do definitely see those network effects across, I think, all areas of technical human activity, people clustering together. And so we took a decision some time ago to focus our R&D efforts and to bring them together in one place in Cambridge. And with the opening of the campus this year, we'll be able to reap those benefits. I think that will drive, hopefully, further progress in what is a really exciting time to be involved in biopharmaceuticals, because we have so much more information about the way that you can personalize medicine in order to serve the specific needs of specific groups of patients. That taking that data and using techniques like big data to analyze much faster than humans can analyze potential new candidate molecules for a particular mechanism. The opportunities there are enormous, and so I think it's going to be a very exciting decade ahead in terms of progress in biopharmaceuticals, and we hope to be one of the leaders in that.
Thank you. I've got another question here, saying that there's discussion around the temporary lift on the patents for COVID vaccinations. Where does AstraZeneca stand on this?
So sure. So as I said, we have since the start of this process been committed to providing our vaccine on a not-for-profit basis. That equates to a price per dose of around $3 to $5 in most markets, and we are in this to make money. So in some senses, we don't have an axe to grind. I don't think actually that intellectual property barriers are the barrier to vaccination against COVID-19 at the moment. We're lucky enough to have several vaccines that are very effective in addressing this need. And the real bottleneck is around production. It's around getting increasing production. It's not clear to me, at least, how changing patent law around those vaccines would actually accelerate that process. It takes a long time. One of the things we found in ramping production in Europe is that actually it just takes a long time, because there are immutable periods of within the production process. I mean, it's a 100-day plus process to produce vaccines. If you add on the process of setting up your manufacturing plant, of making sure that it's safe, of installing the correct, you've got a significant number of months before you can even start that process. So actually, the barrier here is not really intellectual property. So as I say, it's not something we have an axe to grind on. We are providing the vaccine on a not-for-profit basis during the pandemic, but generally, I'm not sure how it helps the situation.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you. There were quite a lot of questions about the fact that you did this on a not-for-profit basis. So I think you've covered all of them there. So I think we've got time for one more, just so that we keep on schedule. So a very quick question. I think it says, is AstraZeneca likely to link with Oxford on a malaria vaccine?
So we do get asked, to what extent, because we're not a vaccine company. So we do have a medicine for flu, a flu vaccine called FluMist, but that's a relatively small part of our activities, less than 2% of annual sales. So we're not a vaccine company. When we signed the agreement with Oxford, we took the expertise that we do have, and we work with partners, with contract manufacturing organizations to set up the supply chain that's now producing the tens of millions of doses that I talked about. So we're often asked, does this mean that you're getting into vaccines, or you will have a future vaccine business? And the answer to that is we really haven't decided yet. At the moment, we are focused on delivering the COVID-19 vaccine and playing our part in the pandemic. If that leads to opening up of opportunities in future areas of vaccine technology, that could be in partnership with Oxford, or it could be in partnership with others, then that is something that we'll look at, but it's not our current focus. Our current focus at the moment, in terms of our vaccine efforts, is to increase production and play as large a role as we can in the global war on this pandemic.
Sorry, I said that was the last one, but actually we've had a number that I could distill into one. So given the approval experience with the COVID vaccine, do you think future drug approvals will be speedier?
Well, I think it's a really good question, actually, and I think it has shown the ability for global health authorities to work together, for instance, to regulatory authorities to work together, to share data. I think it has shown the potential for speed in terms of running things in parallel. So I think we have learned something in terms of those. When you run things in parallel, you do take on financial risk, because there is the process of, if you run a simultaneous phase 2 and phase 3 trial, you can get a medicine through the clinic faster, you get more data faster, but of course if your phase trial would have told you that you should stop, you don't get that opportunity. So there is a balance to be had in terms of how much you learn the lessons. Clearly the pandemic has been a need of the utmost urgency, and so it absolutely made sense for governments to fund, to take on the risks of vaccine production and accelerate the process. So, and that's not going to apply to every situation and every disease and unmet need out there, but it might apply to some, and there might be opportunities in what we've learned about the potential to speed up that process for us and regulators to do more to speed up that process.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. There have been a lot of questions, which we'll put to you after the event, if that's all right. But
very happy to do that.
Thank you. In the interest of staying on time, thank you very much for your time this morning. Really interesting to talk to you, and we look forward to being in touch in due course.